Today I'm at Mount Zion Cemetery in Maspeth, Queens. A Jewish cemetery with over 200,000 graves, all packed in tightly next to each other. So why am I stood upon a hill in a vast open space, with only a small smattering of gravestones in this one area of the cemetery? Well, stay tuned, and I will tell you all about it. At the bottom of the hill that I am stood upon, to the right, and indeed on the hill that I am stood on right now, this was once the land owned by Captain Richard Betts, out of Homestead, England. He came to America in 1648, and at around 1651 he arrived here in New York. Captain Betts was a bitter opponent of the Dutchman Peter Stuyvesant, and the English settlers had planted their own land on Long Island and had called it Newtown. Being unable to secure the land from the Dutch, Betts went directly to the Native Americans who occupied the land at the time and purchased it himself, along with 55 other English settlers. The princely sum that they paid for the land was £68, 16 shillings and fourpence. From that time forward, Captain Betts was a prominent member of society who had great influence on the town of Newtown. In fact, you would be hard-pressed to find any article written about the first 50 years of Newtown and not find Betts' name included in it. After the Dutch ceded New Netherlands to the English in 1663, Betts was an assemblyman for Newtown, and he eventually became the High Sheriff of Yorkshire upon Long Island. By this time, of course, New Netherlands had been renamed New York. Here's something that you might not know as well. The borough of Queens was originally called Yorkshire, between 1664 and 1683. You won't find that little nugget on a Wheaties box. Captain Betts was a magistrate whom in the following years acquired significant lands in the English Kills section of Long Island. All of the land surrounding the area that I am on was divided up amongst the 55 English landowners, and the hamlet thrived. Within 40 years, the population of the area grew to 1,000, and the land that we are actually standing on today was the homestead of Captain Richard Betts and his family. The Betts family residence, seen in this image here, was, as I mentioned earlier, situated at the bottom of the hill and just off to the right. And in fact, the house stood in that spot until 1899, some 243 years after it had been built. The Mount Zion Cemetery was founded in 1893, but at the time the original burial grounds were located in the northeast section of this settlement, whereas I am stood in the southwest corner. Obviously, you will be able to work out that Mount Zion grew and grew over the next 130 years. Now, before I go on, I do want to let you know that all of my research is from newspaper archives from the late 1800s up until 1911. And one thing that I noticed during my research was that there was a lot of discrepancies in the various newspaper articles. So what I have tried to do is consolidate all of the information, and I have made informed guesses in some instances where things do not match up. For example, one newspaper article gives the death of the widow of Daniel Betts Jr. as happening in 1877 at the age of 109. Daniel's grave, however, indicates that he died in 1762. Therefore, his widow likely died around the late 1830s. Probably 1838, based on the other information that I garnered. The person who was buried in 1877 was likely the granddaughter of Daniel Betts Jr., if my map is correct. Captain Betts lived on this very land until his 100th year, and there is a legend that is attached to his name in every ancient newspaper article that I have read about him. For local history dictates that shortly before his own death, at the age of 100, Captain Richard Betts dug his own grave, which was located within viewing distance of his bedroom window. Unfortunately, there is no headstone for Captain Richard Betts, or at least we are led to believe that, so the exact location of his grave is unknown. You will, however, notice some rudimentary headstones bearing simply the initials of the person interred there. The three prominent initialed headstones belong to Captain Daniel Betts, died 1757, son of Thomas and grandson of Captain Richard Betts, his wife Mary, died 1759, and their son Daniel Betts Jr., who died in 1762. Captain Richard Betts fathered 8 children, though some sites suggest that he only fathered 7 children, the last of whom was Thomas Betts. The first headstones that appear belong to the children of the last-born Thomas Betts. Therefore, it is quite likely that the vast open space without headstones on the grounds where I am is the final resting place of Captain Richard Betts, his wife, their 8 children, and quite likely many grandchildren belonging to his first 7 born. How they were able to determine where previous bodies were buried, I have no idea. And of course, it is quite possible that the 5 daughters of Captain Richard Betts are buried elsewhere in the hamlet with their husbands and families. You will notice, however, that other names appear in the graveyard, and these would be Betts family descendants who married into various branches of the family tree. I guess the one question that remains, and it is the one question that I cannot answer with knowledge, is why does a Jewish cemetery not only incorporate a Quaker cemetery within its grounds, but as you can see as well, they also maintain the burial grounds with care, even though the last burial in this small cemetery happened 145 years ago. It is likely that somewhere in the will or deed it is written that whomever adopts the land must also preserve the burial grounds that are contained within it. That might sound like a stretch, but it was actually common practice in days gone by. However, it could also be tied to Jewish burial traditions not to disturb those already lying in peace. I really don't know. It is likely the former, though, as I have heard of that many times in New York. In fact, there's a great future story that I want to tell you when they built General Grant's tomb for the former President of the United States, Ulysses Grant, in Upper Manhattan. During the building process, they decided to remove the single-person gravesite of an amiable child that is located across the street from the tomb. Not so fast, said New Yorkers, and a groundswell of public outrage opinioned. That's not how New York works. For the boy's uncle had written in the deed in 1797 that this memorial is to be kept enclosed and sacred. It still remains that way 225 years later. That's for a future story, though, and it only ties in loosely to this one. The Betts Family Cemetery in Maspeth, Queens.